750 members of the European Parliament, and when I was an MEP, I was one of only a handful who ever spoke out in support of Russia, and when I did so, I faced almost unanimous hostility. So it makes a good change to be discussing matters about Russia amongst friends, and I'd like to thank the organisers for the invitation and for a great conference. The USA, NATO, liberal capitalism, Anglo-Zionism, the New World Order, neoconservatism, whatever you call it, is the same thing. It's a total war against Russia. But it's not only a war against Russia, it's also a war against Christendom as a whole. And the western half of Christendom has almost lost that war. Western Europe is almost finished. We have, as we've heard, the flaunting of perversion, the destruction, the complete destruction of national sovereignty, the systematic denigration of Christianity, mass abortion, privatisation, the looting of all our common wealth, with a concentration of that wealth in the hands of 1% of the population. And most of all, mass immigration on a scale which, as we've already heard, has guaranteed demographic disaster in Western Europe in the next 25 years at most. Constantinople has been and gone. And Rome, and the Protestants who came from Rome, will go the same way. It's now absolutely inevitable that in the lifetimes of most of the people in this room, Western Europe will either become an Islamist caliphate or there will be a terrible civil war, or perhaps both. It's unavoidable, which makes the survival of Christendom absolutely only possible through the rise and the survival of the Third Rome, of Moscow and of Russia. Every great European nation has had its time leading Europe and indeed the world. The Greeks, the Romans, the Spanish, the French, the Germans, the British. Every great people except the Russians. And now it becomes, historically, Russia's turn. And this is why a conference like this, to build cooperation between the true patriots, the conservatives with a small c, not the Reagan-Thatcher conservatives with a big C, the conservatives of the West. The Alliance for Peace and Freedom has produced a number of speakers here we've listened to with interest, and we are radical nationalists. We stand for a saving revolution. We're not fascists. If you want to see fascists, look in Ukraine at the Azov battalion, look at the death squads of Kiev, financed by New York, financed by oligarchs, funded by the European Union, excused and supported by David Cameron and all the governments of the West. Those are the fascists and the supporters of the fascists. And they're doing these things in a systematic way with the aim of provoking Russia in order to allow so much pressure, or ideally, to some of them, a war against Russia, that Russia falls. Now you can look at this in a materialistic, modernist way, that you have the world empire and its clients, captive states, including those of the European Union, against an energy superpower, Russia, and its allies. You can look at it as a clash between those who want a one world order, unipolar dictatorship, and those who see the far greater value in the humanity of a multipolar world, where the different regions, the different traditions, the different religions all have their place on God's earth. Or you can view it on a higher plane, the struggle between Christendom and allies of ancient civilizations, China, India, and Iran, for example, against a hidden, occult, literally evil power based in Washington, D.C. And this struggle is a struggle, it's a matter of life and death. It's actually quite an old war. What we're seeing now looks eerily like, to many people, the run-up to the First World War. But there's actually close parallels from about 1870, I'm sure you know this really, to 1917. There was constant pressure from people based in the West to destroy the empire of Russia. In 1905, as one example, the Hong Kong and Shanghai National Bank, its main man, one Ewan Cameron, and his main director, one Arthur Levita, provided the money, the loan, through the Rothschilds to Japan, which financed the 1905 war against Russia. And it did so with the aim of so damaging Russia that there could be a revolution. The great-great-grandson of Ewan Cameron and Arthur Levita, through the different children, is David Cameron, our Prime Minister. Truly, the idea, if you call it an Anglo-Zionist attack against tradition all over the world, against Christendom and against Russia, it's very, very accurate. And they're doing the same thing again. Now you have a stack of NGOs. You have Victoria Nuland, you have George Soros, you have their Wahhabi and the Nazi puppets. And what you have really is the grandchildren of the original Trotskyites who seized control and tortured Russia in 1917, are now operating again out of New York, again with the powers of the international banks, and once again Russia and the people of Russia are the targets of these people. And they'll keep on doing it. There's a saying that the IRA used to use in Northern Ireland about the British government: we only had to get lucky once. And in the attack on Russia from 1870 to 1917, they only got lucky once. But what a disaster for Russia happened in 1917, when what they call a Russian revolution was a coup d'etat, a coloured revolution, and it certainly fundamentally was not by or for the Russian people. Now, they've only got to get lucky once again. They will keep on trying. This is why Russia... translation's gone through. It's possible. This is why Russia has to go on the offensive. If you imagine Russia as a boxer, if a boxer only defends, only ducks and dives and covers, and never hits back, sooner or later he has to lose. Russia must go on the offensive. Not militarily, but politically and religiously. It's clearly happening economically, where Russia is working very hard, quite obviously, to work towards replacing the dollar as the only real means of exchange in the world. It's extraordinarily important. But there's one more attack that's needed, or offensive, and that's in the media. Looking for the West at RT, Russia's attempts to counter the capitalist media of the West are indeed very effective. But they're missing there's a huge gap, as Jim Dowson said, in social media. The neocons are pouring vast amounts of money into social media to try to dominate it. And not enough is being done to push back. And it needs to be done because a push for war, war's the final stage. Shooting war, but it starts with a war for minds. And the conservatives, the traditionalists of Russia and the Western world have to find ways to make our war for the minds of our people, for peace, far, far more effective. They're trying to demonise Russia, talking about Russian aggression. Aggression. Serbia, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Ukraine. Everything the neocons touch, they're like Midas in red. Everything they touch turns to blood and disaster. That's the reality of aggression. And we need to expose this. And on the internet, we barely scratch the surface of what can be done. And it's why this conference is a very important step forward to ensure that we need to build mechanisms whereby we can get the information with which to fight their warmongering. So video clips from showing what's really happening in Donbass, what's really happened in Donetsk, who is really responsible. These have to be got from Russia into the West and delivered to millions and millions and millions of people in the way that Jim Dowson was talking about. It's absolutely important, crucial, crucial. So I want to see us work to building a permanent operation, a connection between Russia and the people of Russia and the truth activists in the West, to put the truth into every major language in Europe and in America, to build a voice for traditional Christian values, to build a voice for the conservative counter-revolution, to build a voice of hope for a multipolar world based on national sovereignty and social justice, a voice, above all, for peace. Spasibo Bolshoi.